Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our podcast series, The Greener Side, where we uncover and discuss topics that strongly influence our lives, ranging from water, environment, climate, finance, research, and media. Our guest speakers are individuals who are passionately active and knowledge experts of these diverse sectors. We're on our journey to understand the challenges and potential solutions for moving on to the greener side, and you're welcome to hop on. So let's begin with episode 3. I am Monica, and today we will be talking about the importance of public policies and what a career within public policy might look like. Our guest for today is Mr. Luis Miranda. Luis is a co-founder of the Indian School of Public Policy, which offers India's first one-year postgraduate certificate program in public policy, based in Delhi and in partnership with the Harris School of University of Chicago. He's also associated with the Center for Civil Society, a think tank that advocates for markets, freedom, incentives, competition, and choice, focusing on education policy and improving the lives of the poor. Luis is connected with Coro, which empowers grassroots leaders through a 12-month fellowship program. Additionally, he actively engages with several other notable nonprofits, including Take Charge, Educate Girls, 17,000 Feet Foundation, Sunbird Trust, SBI Foundation, Sneha, and ATE Chandra Foundation. On the corporate side, Luis serves as a senior advisor at Morgan Stanley and chairman of Manipal Signa. He's also on the board of L&T Technology Services. His roles extend to being a member of the advisory board of the Rastandi Center for Social Sector Innovation, a member of the Global Leaders Group at Chicago Booth, and a trustee of the University of Chicago Trust in India. He's also one of the esteemed board members of Rao Foundation. Beyond his professional commitments, Luis also enjoys writing, traveling, and continuous learning. So welcome, Luis, to the greener side. And without further ado, let's dive into our public policy conversation. So before I get into the first question, maybe you'd like to tell our audience a little bit about what public policy actually is.
Thank you, Monica, and thank you for having me here. I get asked this question a lot. What is public policy about? And, so there's a story about if you give someone fish, it's charity. If you were to teach someone how to fish, that's skilling. But what happens if you actually created an environment where people found that you could fish freely, you could make a living from fishing, and then people would set up training schools to encourage people to learn fishing. They would people would make boats for people to buy fishing. People would have set up cold storage to handle the produce of the fishing industry. You'll have an old ecosystem set up because it is economically viable to fish. Right. That's what policies are about. It's really those rules that sort of govern the ability to do things in an efficient manner, that you therefore don't require charity, or you don't require to have skilling, etc., in NGO intervention, but just the policies that come out. Today, we live in a world of Samaj, Sarkar, Basar. They're all interconnected. And how do we therefore look at the rules and the laws that govern the way that we interact with each other? That's what public policy is. Way back, I was a beneficiary of public policy, which I didn't appreciate fully at that time. I just looked at the laws allowed it to happen. One was in 1991 when there was the opening up of the economy. The second was in 94 when the government announced the setting up of private sector banks, and I had a chance to be part of the startup team at HDFC Bank. And then there was in 2002 when the government announced the setting up of an infrastructure equity fund, which will be managed by IDFC, and I had a chance to run it. So I've been professionally, personally, and financially a beneficiary of public policy changes. How do we set up these laws to make it better for everyone?
Right.
The best way I realized that to take people out of poverty is through economic development. Economic development requires laws, and that's where we come in over here, the policy angle to it.
Correct. Thank you for that concise explanation of public policy. Definitely helped me understand, what public policy is as well. So my first question to you, since I work at Rao Foundation, which is an NGO, I'm curious to know how public policies impact the NGO landscape in India.
So let's look at two aspects. One is, which is more commonly known, is the education space. Mm-hmm. So we all work with education. A lot of the nonprofit sector works in the field of education, takes schooling. And in schools, we're working on programs to improve the quality of education of children, give them access to better education, etc. But quite often also, these NGOs are involved with various state governments, either in terms of defining policies or being able to help them implement certain policies. So where have our graduates gone at the Indian School of Public Policy? They've gone and joined organizations like People Foundation, which works with government policy and implementation in the education sector in Madhya Pradesh. They worked with 17,000 Feet Foundation, where we work in Ladakh with education policy and looking at it. Or we work with they've gone and worked with Educate Girls in Rajasthan, working on the education policy in Rajasthan. Now let's look at what Ra does. Ra is very involved with this whole natural resources space. We work on water, we work on live agriculture, we work on regreening, etc. There are huge policies that impact it. For example, the regulation of deforestation, the Forest Conservation Act of 1980, the laws that came up about that. All that sort of is public policy. Whereas we look at our whole programming of how do we regreen the areas around Nasik, that's part of public policy, because it creates those enabling provisions which allow you to do so is policies. Like, can we look at a barren hill and say, let's sort of, build a forest on top of that hill? It may take a few years. The ability to do so is part of policy. And therefore, it's not only just working with the actual programming and rallying the communities to go build those forests, but also it's those laws which let you go ahead and do it, which is important.
Right.
Similarly with water conservation, we're looking at, setting up these check dams and waters, but then we also eventually want to get water into everyone's home. That's the Jal Jeevan Mission, another public policy initiative.
Very interesting, to see how like Ra's work relates to like all these existing policies.
Absolutely. The National Forest Policy of India, 1988, has an impact on the reforestation that we do.
Right. Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to our second question. What do you think are the emerging trends in public policy that will shape the future of the NGO sector?
I think what everyone is now looking for is how do the three sectors, Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar, work together in the ability to make change happening in our society. So the ability to understand how these three work together is very important. It's not just the government on its own. It's not just the corporate sector with the government. It's also about the third, which is civil society,
Correct.
the non-profit sector, and what role does that play? And what's important here is public policy. If we just step back, for example, what do we talk at the Indian School of Public Policy? We talk about creating next-gen policy leaders for a rising India. We want to be part. We want to build up people who will be there to help India become this much stronger nation and a global player in the future. And one of them is really carrying these three parts together, Samaj, Sarkar, Bazaar. But it's also about making the voice of the person, the democratization of public policy. It's not about policies written by somebody who's sitting in Delhi at the apex, sort of in an ivory tower deciding what's to be done, or in a state capital, but it's really, what do the people in the communities want? So, for example, come back to the regreening. Yes, I mean, the Ra team went over there and said, why don't we do this? But the community said, there's this opportunity. We would like this thing to be regreened. Or this is some place that we'd like to sort of work on. Or this is, the water problem that we have. So it's not about someone sitting in Mumbai saying this is what we should do,
Right.
but the community saying this is what I want, and therefore coming up with policies that. And I think that's the big thing that we all need to learn. How do we have policies that reflect the voices of what the community wants?
Yeah, I very much agree with you because I think ultimately policies are for people, right? So it's like smooth functioning of the society. So including them in this process is, and not just including them, I think like them being a part of this, like from the scratch, like when you're thinking about creating these policies, like, having those conversations with them. So if in a village there is a problem, they don't have a problem for water security and you go and try to solve that issue, they don't really need that. Or an anecdote would be like if someone needs milk and you're giving them water, like that's not going to solve their issues. I think what you're saying is relevant to that when it comes to policies as well. It needs to be equitable as well, because you want a policy that will benefit the community and it's not just for the benefit of one person. So yeah, I agree with you. Okay, so
Okay.
moving on to our next question, and this is a two-part question. So the first question is, do you think the younger generation is interested in learning about public policy, and what kind of career opportunities do you think students would have if they were to pursue, their education in public policy? And second is, what advice would you give to students who are either currently studying public policy or are, in that mind frame of taking up public policy as a career? So, yeah.
Thank you, Monica. This is actually a great question because what excites me most is when I see what our alumni do.
Right.
So let's just look at the batch that recently graduated. Uh, there was one lady who topped it. She was the class valedictorian. She's now going to be working for EY on some of the work that they do with the government. And she had spent many years trying to join the IAS by sitting for the UPSC exam
Okay.
and not been successful. And then when you've gone through all of that and you say, what is it that have I just wasted those years, etc.? And when you look at this lady, for example, you say, wow, that's just fabulous that she's been able to take her experience and transform it into doing something, and therefore possibly having maybe over her lifespan, having a bigger impact on society and us on our lives through the work that she can do outside the IAS. What I've learned at ISPP is getting to meet people who I didn't really get exposed to earlier, which is a lot of people who sat for the IAS. I've met many people who had got through the IAS, but then there are a lot more who don't get through, and what happens with them. And here's a way for them to be very much engaged in this sort of policy side of India, sitting in a quasi-government role or sitting in Samaj or sitting in the government or sitting in the corporate side. So let's look at some of the jobs that people have done. What can people do after this? So we have one of our colleagues uh, who joined the COVID war room when COVID broke out. The government asked us if we could give them some resources, and he's been involved with the health national health mission, and then now with the digital mission of the government on health for the last 4.5 years. And and really sort of seen it entirely go through that process and very passionate about the whole health sector.
Mhm.
Then we have another colleague of ours who alumni of ours who was very passionate about sports.
Mm.
And I remember when she was a student, so she was told like sports is a very niche area, and
Right.
and it's difficult to get advice for this. She's now working on developing the sports policy of the government of Bihar,
Oh, wow.
and and driving that whole space. Then we have another sort of alumni who was very passionate about technology and cyber security. So she worked as part of the University of Chicago Harris International Innovation Co. and was placed with the Observer Research Foundation (ORF), and was involved in many of the topics to do with cybersecurity in the country and the networks being built up for that. And she's now off to get to study further in the US at Georgetown University. So this is some of the stuff, when you have a passion for something, whether it's education or health or sport or technology, and you can go play a role in this. People ask me, what's the future like for someone in public policy?
Mhm.
And today, the way I see it is that the government is more and more involved in our lives. They're there as a customer, as a supplier, uh, as a competitor, as a regulator, as a as a as a sort of a partner to take away some of your profits, as as an enforcer. So they're very much in our lives. How do we deal with them? How do we come up with policies that the government can do better? That's the way that public policy professionals can play in. You look at the work that Ra does. We work, for example, with the Maharashtra Forest Department.
Mhm.
We work with the Gram Panchayat. We're working at different layers of, of government and seeing how we can play a role in improving the lives of the people in those communities.
Right.
Civil society and the government, together with the funding that comes from the corporate side through CSR.
Right.
So it's really how all these three parts come together
Mhm.
in the interventions that Ra Foundation does.
Right. So it does seem like people, care about these issues and are interested and are understanding the importance of public policy in all of our lives. So I was just like doing some research, for this podcast. Is there, and like, you could probably answer this, but is there like a entry barrier, like a financial barrier, like who can pursue public policy as a career? Like, is it expensive? Like, what is the angle on that? I was just curious.
So, I mean, education does cost money,
Right.
whether it's funded by the government or funded by philanthropy or funded by fees, it does cost. So it's like any other program. There is a fee part to it. It also, but it's not as expensive as getting an MBA or going to medical school or going to engineering school. But again, the compensation, the salary you would get post in a public policy program will again not be at the same level as those other programs.
Right.
Having said that, people can lead a very comfortable life in public policy as a public policy professional. So let's look at schools have also uh, scholarship programs. Like we have programs over here, which enable people from different parts of the country come and study. We've had people study over here who grew up in farm communities, who grew up in remote places, who have, gone on, who are passionate about wanting to make a change,
Mhm.
either at the national level or at their own community level. And we believe that money should never be the reason for them not having that opportunity.
Right.
And that's something which we always will work hard on to be able to give that access.
Right. So, I feel that this is a perfect transition into my next question. So I wanted to, learn a little bit more about. So you've been working with Coro, which again empowers grassroots leaders through a fellowship program. I was just curious if you could share with our viewers how the fellowship works and how it's contributing to our society.
Sure. Thank you, Monica. So I got introduced to Coro possibly around 10 years ago through actually an organization which is based in London. And and what I loved about the work that Coro did was it worked at the grassroots level. So we work really with communities who are marginalized to a large degree. And our flagship program is what we call the leadership, the grassroots leadership development program, where you become a Coro fellow for a year. And we take young people,
Mhm.
young is a relative word, some of them are not that young, and we take them through a 1 year program. They have to be associated with an NGO or a self help group in their community and work on a project with that community for a year,
Oh, wow.
which we then get tracked together with the team and the mentors at Coro through the life of that 1 year program. And periodically, once a quarter, we would get them into a classroom, and we would have discussions with them on certain aspects, understanding yourself, understanding working with others, and then tactical things like getting information under the RTI, being able to sort of prepare a business plan. That's what we do. And our fellows have gone on to do fabulous things across the world,
Awesome.
across our communities. And a few years ago, one of them was on BBC's top 100 aspirational women.
Oh, wow.
And you just see the stories of them. It's like an ISPP. The way they've been able to leverage or whatever they had before, and through that fellowship program, go on to do even more fabulous stuff is what is amazing. So we at Coro have no minimum qualifications. 70% of our fellows have been from marginalized communities. 70% are women, and about 40% or so have only been up to secondary schools. So education, age, caste, nothing is a barrier. It's really about mission that you want to do and work towards it. We work in Rajasthan and Maharashtra. Maharashtra's got the largest cohort.
Mhm.
And the ability to use different tools to be able to influence change has been fantastic. So,
Right.
for example, one of our fellows is working on in a community in Rajasthan where Adhyapa caste people would not go to a low caste person to get their hair cut. And how do you get people to change that behavior? And this person finally realized that, told the upper class people that when you go to a hospital, you don't check who your doctor is, what caste he
Right.
or she is.
Mhm.
And you still go to the doctor because the doctor is going, you believe that the doctor is good for you. So similarly, if you believe that the barber is good for you, you should not be too worried about what the color or the skin or the caste is.
Right.
And being able to therefore take that into influencing what they do. Or similarly, another community we work with where this young lady, her job was to get more women, Muslim women from her community to be allowed to go by the family to go to school or college. Her work was engaging with the elders in the community to be able to do so. Or it is the single women. These are women who've been abused by either being widowed, divorced, or abandoned. And how do you give them a platform that they can make a new life and succeed over there? Again, fabulous stories of change. That's what Coro is sort of to be. So to me, again, both at ISPP and at Coro, what excites me most are the stories of change that we've seen and the amazing things that they've gone to do after they leave the program.
Right. Yeah, that is, very inspiring indeed. And like me personally, I have, done quite a few fellowships, and I really appreciate, fellowships that really like help empower the youth and give them hands-on experience, like real world like opportunities, which like is great, and it really like shows you and teaches you a lot in the process. So yeah, that's awesome, and I'm really glad that Koro is, doing that for marginalized communities and youth out there. So my last question for you, and you kind of touched on it. I know you have shared quite a few stories, like, throughout our conversation. So like, as I mentioned, that you work with a lot of other social organization. Is there any story in particular that you would like to share that, has like really stayed with you, or you think it would be really inspiring for the viewers to hear, even though I think everything that you've shared until now has been very inspiring. But if there was something to, end the podcast with, give a slither of hope to our viewers, feel free to share.
Okay, let me tell you the story of Umesh Jadhav.
Yeah.
And I hope I don't sort of, um, um, mash up badly some of this parts of his life. It's how I recall it. Maybe I've got some things wrong. So Umesh, if I have sort of said something a bit wrong, I apologize. So Umesh, if I remember correctly, his father was the first one in the family to get educated and was a teacher, and then unfortunately died young.
Mm.
in an accident. So Umesh, his brother, another, had to sort of, build out a life of their own. He went to a boarding school which is run by the Maharashtra government, and then went on to do his engineering and worked as a software, worked with a software developer in Pune for a year, and then realized that his heart was actually in social transformation, not in being in the IT world. So he quit his job, which paid him very well, and went to work with the bunks in Gachiroli, and spent a couple of years over there, working very closely both the doctors over there, and and got so involved with how can you use policies for social change and transformation. He then came to ISPP, and because again of his tech experience, was part of the University of Chicago's International Innovation Co. And worked with on I think the national on in UP with the State Technology Health Plan, and is now in Hyderabad working for an organization called CETUS, and looking at state policies, etc. Uh, if you just look at where he came from,
Mhm.
and the grit and determination that he showed, and he then gave up a career in the private sector because he was not happy with that. He wanted to have an impact. He's
Mhm.
now recently married, and he and his wife, I think, are going to go on to do some fabulous work. And it's just so inspiring to meet someone like him. And when I meet up with him, I get excited myself about how a young person like that could say, "Listen, I don't need the money. I want to go over there and help others." That's fabulous. Or you take at Koro, if I was to look at uh, one of our fellows, she was married off when she was young, and her husband, never really appreciate her because she studied till whatever the fourth standard. He'd only been up to the third standard or whatever, and then somewhere along the way he got some other girl pregnant, and therefore this girl was abandoned and told, "Go back to your village," or whatever. So she realized that if she wanted to do well, she would have to get an education. So she studied and became a lawyer.
Wow.
And she filed 3 cases against her ex-husband.
It's great use
And
for education.
wait, now hear what the judge said. The judge told the husband, if you had not thrown her out, she would have stayed with you, following you around in her gungat. But you threw her out. See what she has done with her life. What have you done with yours?
Right.
She won the case. She won the case.
Wow.
So that to me is how people can go out over there and change the power of one. We talk about this power of one. I'm seeing the power of one
Right.
going out over there and building out strong stories for themselves and for others.
Yeah,
That's
that
what
was,
keeps me going,
yeah.
actually.
Right. No, that is very inspiring. And, it really like gives us that hope we need in times of all this like chaos that's happening all around the world. Like, to see people actually pursuing their dreams, making a change and doing what they wanted. It's awesome. So yeah, that was all the questions I had for you. Thank you so much, Luis, for taking the time to be here and sharing your expertise in public policy and also sharing these really intimate stories. I think it's really inspiring for people to hear people like from marginalized communities or like that didn't have a great start to their life, like really build up their lives and achieve their dreams. So as we end today's episode, for all the viewers, do let us know in the comments how you liked this episode and stay tuned for more of such exciting topics. In the meanwhile, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you all.
Thank you, Monica.
Thank you, Luis.